Good morning and hello everyone, and welcome to SCADstyle. I'm Gwen Krogge, a senior here at SCAD, studying industrial design with a minor in service design. Hello Marek, hello.
Hi.
Hi, we're gonna get through in just a moment here. I'm gonna introduce all of you and then we'll get the talk started.
Perfect.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Same here, yeah?
Yes. So a little bit about myself as the student introducer. I recently completed a SCAD Pro collaboration with the BMW Group on the future of mobility and tech, which is part of why I'm here today. There are many visions of mobility in the future, each presenting its own possibilities, complex problems, and opportunities for innovation. Today, we're going to hear from these three panelists on the topic of future mobility. It's my pleasure to introduce automotive designers and entrepreneurs Tadeusz Jelec and Marek Simko. Tad is the designer for the UK-based TJ Design Consultancy and former design manager at Jaguar. Tad is one of the best-known automotive designers in Poland and is known for collaborating on the nation's first electric car. Marek Simko is the founder of SIMKOM.com, the world's biggest car sketching website. He is an award-winning designer and has worked with brands such as Audi, BMW, Porsche, and Volkswagen. And last but not least, moderating our conversation today is SCAD Chair of Industrial Design and Creative Design Director at Innovatio, Future Mobility USA, Cesar Pieri. Cesar?
Hello, good morning, Gwen. Thank you so much for introducing us. And again, Gwen is one of our superstar students here at SCAD, and it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much. And look at those two kind of very special guests today that I really appreciate. It's an honor to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Ches.
Yeah, good morning, Marek. How are you? I can't hear you for some reason.
Neither can I.
Yeah, and Marek, again, I mean, I've been always looking for your website and sharing with students. It's so inspiring. So it's great to have you here. I still can hear you. I still cannot hear you. So today, let's talk about a little bit about today and how things are going to happen here. So we will be talking about the future of mobility. And a lot of students talk to me and said, what really kind of you're talking about, right? The future of mobility. And going back in that question, they kind of think, what is mobility? A lot of people think that mobility is just kind of moving from A to B, getting in your car and kind of going from your home to the university or going to your home to work or something like that. But actually, mobility goes much further beyond, as you know, right, Tad? It's about moving kind of people, of course. It's about public transportation. Yeah. It's about moving goods. It's about getting a container from, from a producer in Singapore and kind of sending it back to the US or kind of from China to any other kind of places in the planet, and kind of, or moving a pizza. Let's kind of be ready, kind of talk about that, moving a pizza from the pizza shop to your home and getting that still warm, or even in a completely different situation, in an emergency, have a blood being delivered from one hospital in Atlanta to a hospital here in Savannah and saving a life. So mobility is about all that. But most importantly, when we think about urban mobility, kind of, it's where it happens. You must consider that, I mean, the reality and kind of driving around Rome and driving around Savannah or New York or London or Shanghai is completely different. Different cities will have completely different urban scenarios and will require different solutions, right? Rickshaws in China and kind of scooters in Tuscany and F-150s in the US, right? So let's kind of start this conversation talking a little bit of that, like that. What is your vision about future mobility in your own perspective? I gave a hint about myself, but in your own perspectives, how do you see that, Tad?
Well, you see, I'm from a slightly older generation, and 4 wheels or 2 or 3 wheels for me that was the mobility up until sort of 10 years ago, when I started thinking, goodness me, it's exactly what you've just said. There are different forms of mobility. And what is mobility? It's moving things, thoughts, objects, people, all sorts of stuff around to be available to the others. And for example, mobility is something that we're experiencing now. That's also mobility. I mean, one could say, well, it's a communication. Yes, but also I'm transferred over to Savannah, or I'm transferred over to Munich, or wherever the students are in the world. It is a mobility. So that to me is also a mobility. And I've had a conversation recently with Savannah students, and they've raised this subject of mobility in such a way that I've posed a question. Do you think it will be possible to transfer ourselves physically to another corner of the world? Perhaps not, but quantum physics is such an incredible subject that probably will allow us to do such things in the future. And that to me is fascinating. So we're divorcing, well, I have divorced myself from the notion of four wheels, although I love them. But I suppose we will have to change our sort of view on what generally mobility is.
Okay, that's really cool. Marek, kind of welcome back again. Can I hear
I
you
hope
now?
it
Oh,
does it
yes,
work
it can.
now?
It does
Good.
work.
Yes, it works
Fantastic. Yeah, so
perfectly. Yeah.
that's really cool.
Perfect.
And again, great. I mean, now that we are all three here, fantastic, right? I kind of almost
Yes.
feel the same feeling that I had about a year ago when we all kind of were here in Savannah enjoying SCAD and
Exactly.
the city and kind of having some good chat with students. So thank you for that. And Marek, your kind of own perspective, kind of a brief perspective about mobility in general. How do you feel,
Mhm.
right? How do you see it?
So first of all, let me say a big thank you, because exactly 1 year ago, I was on the plane from Munich to Washington, and you had no idea where I am because I was
Yeah, I
lost, right?
remember. We lost Marek. Where is he?
I was lost somewhere on the plane, which was super fun, but it was not. But in the end, we figured it all out. And then I had the pleasure to meet both of you guys who did a tour, and I must say I'm really impressed what kind of facilities all the students at SCAD have there. There's this rich history, like it's mind blowing. And if there was not this certain pandemic, I would love to go back and do this live.
We will do it. We will do it.
Yeah, we will do it. We catch up on this one. So coming back to your question, Ted just touched base upon it very briefly, but also on a very meta, let's say, abstract level. And I would say before we go to quantum physics, it would be cool if our cars learn to see the surroundings if they want to come to level 5 autonomy, right? And
Yeah.
here I would just say there is a saying, especially by Bill Gates. I think it was him who coined the term, saying, we overestimate what happens in a year, but we tend to underestimate what happens in a decade. And just look back what happened from 2010 to 2020. I was listening to a podcast where it was a business related podcast, and the author, it's the company Wondery. They have a series where they juxtapose different players in the economy. So, for instance, Coca-Cola against Pepsi, or let's say IBM against Apple,
Dell.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And here they've made a podcast about Uber against Lyft. And it was super interesting because from what I understood, Lyft started pretty much like Facebook. It was a ride-hailing or pool-hailing service that was started as a Facebook group first, because there were some students on a campus saying like, hey, Cesar, you got a fancy car. I would love to join a ride from Savannah to, I don't know, Orlando, right? I would love to get a ride in this kick-ass mad Jaguar from Cesar, right? I mean, of course, because
Yeah.
I'm a shabby student, I can only, I don't know, afford a bus, yeah? Or if I'm a bit more fancier, I'm gonna have a Toyota Prius, which is already beaten and 20 years old, right? And here I am. I have the chance to participate in that service. So of course I'm gonna book it for, I don't know, $15. And this was especially in the year 2010. They were starting with these services, and then 10 years later, it's worldwide. It's still a startup, but it's a global operation. Like I can text here on my device. I can call an Uber, and it's gonna be here in 10 minutes, and it's gonna be your car or even a fancier Tesla Model X, because it's possible.
Yeah.
And this is the change in transportation that we don't come to appreciate, because we are coming from the traditional background of car design. Yeah, that's to break it down. It's actually car styling. Yeah, so let's say I'm very familiar with a German OEM, and let's call it Volkswagen. Yeah, and they have perfected the game. So they launched in the 70s the beautifully designed Golf MK1. Please correct me, gentlemen. I think it was Giugiaro who designed that box, right?
It was, yes.
It was.
Yes.
Yeah. When was it? In 71, 70, whatever?
That was 70. The car was launched in 74. So 71 would be the approach. Well, maybe late 60s even.
Yeah.
You know, because the normal period was usually about 4.5, 5 years from the first drawing to the complete car. So hey.
But there
long
you go.
Time ago.
That was generation 1 in the 70s. Yeah. I hope the car is kind of familiar over in the US.
Oh yeah.
Because now it has reached the 8th generation. It's insane, yeah? Like you have 8 generations. And if we know that we as car designers, we live in the future. So if it's 2020 and my assignment is to come up with a new Golf, which will be launching in 2024, I gotta finish now, so that in the 3 years, the product development process spits out the car off the production line, right?
Yeah.
So this thing has been happening for the last 40 years. No, 50. And it's coming to an end, but it's not. And that's the thing, what I was saying, like, let's don't underestimate what has happened over the last decade. Yeah, there is a super successful ride sharing service or pool riding. I don't know the terms. I don't know the differences yet. But let's say there is a service where I can book a car, and it's actually more than a cab drive, because a cab drive is this beaten yellow cab that I know from New York. But if I order an Uber, I'm going to have the fancy Model S plate. It's going to be a funky car. And that's why I'm going to pay $20 for it for this 1 hour. But I don't want to own the car. And that's the huge difference. So I'm going to book mobility for, let's say, 1 hour. I'm going to have fun. But in the same time, there is this OEM who just launched generation 8 of the icon called Golf. But all of a sudden, the generation who doesn't have 1, but has 2, and constantly messages on these 2 devices while having a FaceTime call with you guys, is not interested in a Golf 8, right? They don't want to own it. And I would even go that far to say I have some friends who are 17 and they say, why should I do a driving license? Why?
And
there you have a problem.
And this opens a kind of the conversation for something that I want to kind of discuss here. Again, we're talking about the kind of future of mobility and concepts for automotive design, and we are car designers, and we've been doing this for kind of many years, and we know very much how it works, time frame, kind of this kind of from the first sketch 4 or 5 years later, or now kind of shortened 3.5 years, kind of he can get a car. But if we imagine that the carriage, right, in the medieval time, or the horse was the kind of the first kind of way of transportation, kind of. Let's go back even further. Man cave, right? He would kind of walk around to hunt, get and bring food to his home. That has been very much for the same way for hundreds of thousands of years. And then in the medieval time, kind of they started using horses for war, for transportation. They got a carriage. And I consider kind of the carriage and the horse the first analog autonomous vehicle. You would sit in a carriage, probably because you have a carriage, and you would say, castle, and you wouldn't do anything. You would be sitting there. And then the coachman would say, oh, and the horse would take you from one of your properties to a castle, but you wouldn't do anything. You would be sitting behind in a carriage. If you see a Model S or any autonomous concept car, the only difference, it's now all that is, it's digital. You see it and you say, okay, this is the route that I'm going. I want to go from A to B. And the car autonomously using radars and leaders will change you from one point to another one. Still using 4 wheels, still using a type of much more modern carriage with a lot of features, air conditioning and so on. The only kind of main difference is the outcome. Right? Let's say the horse as engine in the past, you know very much the outcome of the engine, very sustainable and kind of very clean, does not pollute depending how you take it. Our cars with combustion energy or electric motors are completely different and eventually pollutes when producing, or the way you produce the energy or burning fuel. So let's stop on that. Considering that by 2050, 67 to 70% of the population will be living in urban
areas.
Urban
areas, yes.
And you have this kind of from medieval time until from kind of man cave to medieval, basically no change. From medieval to industrial revolution, then kind of coming to where we are now is a kind of a skyrocketing change. Like you said, in 10 years time, everything moved. Thinking that 2050, where do you see transportation going? How do you see this evolution? The industry doesn't change much. No, I mean, well, because kind of I'm working on a data here, kind of that 70% of the population will be in a city environment. But we can talk about now. OEMs
look,
are very...
guys, I mean, it's 2050 is 30 years away. Taking into account the sort of exponential development of
let's talk about 10 years
stuff. It's unbelievable. It's very hard to predict. I mean, 10 years is probably something that we can grasp in terms of the technology development, and even that is something that is very hard to predict. However, you know, the things like pandemia has forced us to think differently as well. You know, something that we haven't envisaged that is going to happen, and it did happen, and it forces us. So it forces us to think in different terms about what we as human beings, what are our priorities, and in terms of the mobility, is completely different than it was last year. You know, it's people all of a sudden. People started to get used to the devices or ways of communication that they wouldn't even dream about. You know, I remember times when the guy walked into our studio with a portable phone, and the battery itself was the size of a briefcase, and the handset was the size of a brick. What, you know, And that was 25 years, well, 30 years ago. But you see, Marek showed, put his phone up, this is something that James Bond was dreaming about, communication and being able to appear here and there and everywhere. And that is mobility. And imagine, talking about autonomous vehicles. I think that's going to go even further. Autonomous vehicles that we see today are just normal cars that are equipped with devices that allow us to just hop in, and as Cez, you said, it's a carriage.
Yeah, the concept is
It's
the
a
same,
carriage
right?
with an engine. It is exactly the same concept. But what will this carriage look like in 10 years' time? It really depends on us. It really depends on the necessities that we would want to fulfill. And, Marek said, we are stylists. We can call ourselves stylists, maybe not designers, maybe designers, but it's really up to us. It's really up to the new generation of people, people who are, have just been born, or people, children at the age of 10, students age of 20. And it's going to be up to their imagination how they're going to transfer their lives, or how they're going to what they're going to create for themselves as means of transportation, as means of mobility. It's funny because I've got this little car, Mazda MX-5, and I call it a slightly civilized skateboard. Why? Because it is like it's slightly bigger than a skateboard. It's got an engine and it drives. But I can compare me being sort of a certain age. I need to be slightly more comfortable than the skateboarder of the age of 15. But it works as on the same principle, moving myself fast, with a little bit of fun and avoiding troubles. However, that's going to change. That's got to change, because we are not the same. We live in a sort of times when our social life is so different to what it used to be for our age groups 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Sure. Marek, how do you see 10 years in time? What is your perspective? Like, how is it evolving? Is the carriage concept changing? Are we still going to be kind of commuting on F-150s that kind of, mainly here in the US, are kind of immense trucks, kind of alone for 20 minutes, leaving that car, or 1 hour, leaving that car the whole day parked? Then you commute back for another 30 minutes, an hour, a 7-seater V8, immense piece of metal, and then it stays in not my drive, I don't have one of those, for the whole night. That is so old. It looks so old for me. So how do you feel about that? Kind of going a little bit back to my previous question as well. Can you kind of give us your perspective?
Sure, I'll be happy to. I think it also depends where you live in, because I'm like already at the transition of, let's say, the old world and the new world. So I'm really at the intersection. So I don't see myself as part of the world that, let's say, would drive a counterpart of the F-150, which is, I think, the best-selling truck in the US, right? neither see myself as the guy who will be denying driving himself. I just love driving myself, like, obviously, right? Like, I could pull little models like Ted has them behind his chair, and exactly the yellow one and blah. Like,
this is 50 years old, Marek.
Exactly. Yeah. But these things are also meant to stay. And of course, look, this is my answer. Like, look, I have this device. You mentioned the phone and let's say the digital era. But look, here it is. I have the phone, but there is the old flat 6 on it as a wallpaper, right?
And I mean, how are we going
here
to...
as well, like, here it is up there in the driveway. But anyway, what I wanted to make as a point is, you have the F-150, and I was saying that in a certain geography it will still make sense. I don't know the US, but for me it's a huge country, and there will be still huge parts that are rural and where you still have farmers, even 10 years, 15 years down the road. And they don't care about a fancy Uber at all.
I completely understand.
They got some cattle, they got some cows to feed. They'll be happy if the whole thing is still analog, if they have a gas station and the gasoline still runs for the next 15 years. Hopefully it's not gonna quadruple in price. Yeah, I hope so. Because these guys have been living this way and it makes sense. But on the other hand, if you go to Hawthorne, California, you have a guy called Elon, and he's also gonna show an alternative to F-150, which will be the Cybertruck. Either it's gonna look the edgy way, how he did it, to gain attention and everybody speak about it, which obviously worked. Yeah, it worked. Or if we look beneath the surface, like, people still don't get what Tesla is, yeah? I mean, look at the website. It says Tesla Model S, E, X, Y, sexy, right? Done. But if you look at the, let's say, the Ford model, you will find a portfolio of, I don't know, 20 models, like Mustang, blah, 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 Ford pickup, Ford Raptor, Ford F-150, blah, 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 you name it, yeah? 20, 30 models, I don't know. And that's what I was talking about before. We are these normal stylists, and we have to make sure that this portfolio is being kept up to date every 3 years, right? With facelifts, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, there is a new model. There comes a computer hacker and says, like, I'm going to think digital first because this thing is running our society. And like Ted said, in January 2007, it was just put on the map. It didn't exist before. Of course, there was a Palm, there was a BlackBerry, but it didn't have the penetration throughout society, right? And now it has. And then comparing the F-150, which will still come to live, and I think it's going to survive in the next 10 years without problems. But there will be a new model saying, wait a bit, I think digital first, and this thing is digital, so I can actually, it's a device on wheels, because this thing, I don't look at it as a means of communication. For me, this thing, if you look again 20 years back, you guys know the company called Radio Shack, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And if you got to Radio Shack, you would get a prospectus. I don't have anymore any paper, but then it said, like, hey, Cesar, hey, Ted, don't you want to buy a video recorder? Don't you want to buy a calculator? Don't you want to have a computer? And today, I just have the calculator here, right? Then I have the TV series here. And by the way, we forgot about me listening to CDs. Oh, CDs don't exist anymore because everybody has this, Spotify.
And that's a great conversation.
And here, last point. All the stuff that you could buy at Radio Shack 20 years ago exists here.
So, okay, how this evolution and this, in your opinion, Marek, how this evolution and this kind of moving further thinking and kind of converging, for example, digitally, the devices that used to be mechanical and tactile becoming digital, how that kind of will change the way we design our cars in the future. talking about architecture, not how we design them, how the architecture of a vehicle will need to evolve or will evolve to cope with this kind of transformation. How the kind of, are we designing it in the same classic way? Is it going to change? Is the kind of, the architecture will be completely rethink, will be kind of completely, we are going to reframe that completely, or is still going to be seen designing it in the same way? How do you feel about that?
I could give you two answers. It depends what I put on the head of a designer or the head of a businessman. It will be completely different. Because the designer would dream up something that he aspires to, yeah? And you can name whatever. Like you introduced me as the guy who's running a blog, so I'll stay with that model, okay? I publish stuff on the blog that I think cater to the needs of the artistic side. They need to be beautifully crafted.
Yeah.
But what is super important to me is there is some new idea in it, yeah? And the last thing that I posted up there, so let's go to, again, a thing that didn't exist 10 years ago. No, it existed because it was founded in 2011. So, no, true, exactly 10 years ago. So now I just put a story that I'm live with you guys here, right? And this I couldn't do 10 years ago. It just didn't exist. Now I'm talking to my audience of 30,000 people as we speak, yeah? And this didn't exist. And if I go to the feed of that account, then the last post I did was this picture. And I don't know whether you can see it or if it's too many reflections. It shows a, we would call it, it's a canoe toaster, yeah? It's a box. And let's talk about that for a second. So that's for me, again, the same thinking like Tesla. It's digital first. It's a platform. If I'm a businessman, I want to build a platform. What is a platform? Amazon is a platform. Because if Cesar is selling his bonnets on Amazon, I made it up, okay? He's going to profit out of it. Then if Ted is actually supplying the bonnets, these guys will connect over my platform because I'm Jeff Bezos. So all three of us have a certain profit. That's why a platform is a super powerful thing. Three parties profit out of it. That's why I'm going to build another platform like, I don't know what, Spotify, Netflix. Again, the same model. Cesar, you are the content producer. You produce a series like, tell me your favorite Netflix series, please.
I'm watching now the Peaky Blinders and I'm kind of enjoying it.
And then Ted is the guy who is producing Peaky Blinders, and I'm a Mr. Reed Hastings because I run the platform called Netflix. So all three of us profit, and also the students who are listening to our conversations profit because they get top-notch content. They can watch it whenever they want, and they can watch it wherever they want. Like, again, 20 years before, you had to reserve a time in your schedule, go there, put on that damn DVD set, and be there, ideally with your family. Today, you just fire up this thing. If you are on an Uber to Atlanta, right? Was not possible 20 years ago. We didn't imagine that. All of a sudden, it's there.
Car manufacturers will start kind of creating cars in that way? So you provide the platform, for example, the skateboard, and Tad would be able to kind of build his car on top of it, and someone would be able to kind of partner in that, and kind of we create a cycle. It's much more open. So the way we design is not kind of concentrated to OEMs, but allow us to kind of.
One point. Sorry, Ted, for interrupting you, but coming back to the idea of the platform and the reason why I said canoe, and actually Cesar is already proposing one model, but I said I'm going to answer as a businessman, the guy who builds the platform. So I'm going to be Mr. Canoe, right? And I'm going to build a software platform, and the software platform enables me exactly the thing that Netflix enables. So I will have an algorithm that will analyze how much time Cesar is watching Peaky Blinders, right? I'm going to analyze when. No, that's what you think. But if you pull the data, you will see you have a certain perception, and the reality is something that you don't want to know about, right? And that's the thing.
So,
that's
Marek,
the powerful thing. Wait a bit. So you have the software, you have all the data, and that's why you can cater and produce another series like Peaky Blinders. That's a powerful thing. Power of data, software platform. And then all of a sudden, me as a businessman, I can use this data to build exactly what Cesar just said. On top of my hardware platform, a skateboard, for instance, I could put on a canoe toaster, I could put on a Cybertruck truck pickup, or whatever that market needs, right? Or I could answer it from the way of a designer and say, I have an autonomous car, but actually, no, I can't design it myself because I have a clear assignment from my OEM saying the only autonomous car that is selling is a truck. And there, I'm going to look for something else. I will design the interior differently, namely according to Homer Simpson's wish from The Simpsons. If I look back into what Homer Simpson wants to have, he's a self-driving truck so he can eat his donuts and drink his Duff's beer. So all of a sudden, I need to change the interior of the car. It's not going to be driver-oriented. I don't need to have the perfect dashboard that is ergonomic. I want to do this, yeah? Please let the donuts fly into my mouth. And all of a sudden, it's a different interior. And it's been provided by Mercedes-Benz because that's, for instance, the biggest truck OEM in Europe. Yeah. And all of a sudden, me as Homer Simpson, I'm not the driver. I'm the logistics expert. I need to run my schedule where I'm going to deliver the next, I don't know what, packages of Amazon, right? So I changed my job, but I'm still operating the thing. So I can drive it actively, but the regulation in Germany says, no, Homer, you can drive it for 4 hours, then you chill. So you chill because the thing runs itself. Done.
So, Tad, but you're going to make a point as well. So,
yes, I think Marek's just installed a sort of a social aspect of this whole thing, because that is making just you holding ownership of that one platform. You are a dictator.
Yes.
So, well, I'm saying that in inverted commas because you are making other parties dependent on you. Okay, I mean there are all sorts of dependencies, social stuff, but this is already happening. It's like sharing basic components between the companies, between the OEMs and the manufacturers of those components. So it's quite a complex, logistically, it's quite a complex issue. So I suppose, a future of design of moving objects, I would say, because we are talking about objects. I'm just moving into this sort of physically moving object. A future of that is dependent on a lot of things, and I'm just trying to think about the logistics of creation of all that stuff, and one single platform, and loads and loads of iterations of products based on that platform. It makes a lot of sense, but then it creates other issues. It creates the social issues. It creates economic issues. I sometimes when I think about it, I cannot grasp the whole concept of the whole idea of complexity of the whole process.
yeah. So let's say like this. You mentioned about moving stuff, right? So you see kind of different realities happening. You see Amazon, how they deliver, and that's mobility as well. How we deliver packages, for example. You buy something, and in England, I know you buy something in the morning, you get from Amazon in the afternoon, and you see drones getting in the equation. You see vans, and I have the vans driving down my road daily. kind of the guy handling packages, and kind of let's talk about delivering blood. So if you have an emergency, a drone eventually, can it get the blood from a hospital in Atlanta and bring here to Savannah, or from Munich to Salzburg? I mean, to say kind of a huge distance. So how do you see this kind of goods deliver and moving packages and moving stuff evolving in the future? How do you see that kind of evolving into a completely different reality? Marek, you can go first.
Okay. May I answer to Ted's comment first? So you said, like, of course we are bringing in a social aspect, and if you create a platform, you create a certain tension. But look, I mean, how powerful is Amazon, right? I said, like,
very powerful.
There are three parties who are making a benefit, and somebody's making a huge profit out of it. But that's the thing, like with these devices, there is also a thing going on in society which you call the network effect, because there is a certain search engine and we know its name, but nobody says that they have a monopoly on search, right? Because they are in the advertisement business. Well, I don't use that product, but let's say 90% of the population do. I don't use it because I don't want to leave digital traces there. But of course I cannot, but I'm going to leave my digital trace there as well. So I would even add to the complexity. There is not only a social thing going on. I would even say we have something that I hopefully will be disrupted by the next technological development, which is blockchain. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there will be also a blockchain powered e-commerce platform. And then let's see how Jeff Bezos is going to answer to that. And you are absolutely right. On the one hand, there are three parties profiting, the three of us, for instance. On the other hand, it's a monopoly. So it's creating tensions. And like you said, I'm a dictator. And that's why I said I'm going to answer as a businessman first, because I want to be a dictator as a businessman, right? But as a designer, I said, it depends, sure. There are also these, let's say, greenwashed ideas, let's heal the world, blah, 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 yeah? Of course, there are people who mean it, but most of the time it's the ones like Bill Gates, yeah, who can write a nice book about climate change. And it's easy to write a book about climate change if you are the 5th richest person in the world, right? But I mean, I'm not bashing him. I'm just saying, like, he's doing a great job, and he's actually trying to improve the conditions of a lot of people. On the other hand, he's a smart ass. That's why he's doing a Netflix series that documents these things as well. So, and he was warning everybody, all the governments of this world, that there will be a pandemic. But anyways, coming back to the topic, future mobility, and you asking me how I'm going to see moving commercial goods from A to B, right? That was your question, Cesar. Yeah. So I think, again, like if we go back to Canoe, first we said that they have a hardware platform. They're going to put a people mover on top of it, yeah? But they use also this platform to put a commercial vehicle on top of it. And
that's actually much better than I prefer the pickup.
I don't know, like, if you can do the screen sharing here, but if you would put on this MPDV that they did, the multi-purpose delivery vehicle that they showed shortly before Christmas last year, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a package on wheels. And
now that brings me to something called aesthetics. You know, it's you know, because in the sort of early days of the automotive industry, yes, exactly, there was a lot of stuff being done purely on the basis of aesthetics. And yes. Where are we now with the aesthetics? You know, that is it is. Are the aesthetics playing the role of a package, or are they sort of simultaneously playing the role of a carrier, or what is the aesthetics role in creation of a product? Because I think a lot of companies, a lot of people do have the tendency to forget about that aspect of design.
Sure. So let's do like this. Times flies, right? And here we are, we would need another 5 hours to kind of cover everything. But let's bring back Gwen, at least. Yeah. Let's bring back Gwen to our conversation. I think we lost Marek, but no. Gwen, welcome back.
Marek's still there.
I'm still there.
Oh, well, we can't see you. I think your camera is gone.
Oh, we can see you, Marek. I think Cesar can't see you.
Cesar, you can't see me.
Yeah,
everyone's here. Well, thank you so much, and great conversation, Marek and Tad and Cesar. Thank you. Really interesting points brought up. We're going to now go into Q&A. So we are going to take a few questions from our audience. I know I have a first question. And everyone in the audience, be sure to type your questions into the chat. We're going to do our best to get to every question, but we do have a hard stop at 9 a.m. So Marek, Tad, Cesar, my first question is actually that we are a society that moves at breakneck speed. This was mentioned a few times during the conversation. But with an aging population and a pandemic sea change that we've seen, should mobility adapt to help people slow down and be present? And Marek or Tad, either of you could start that one.
Well, if you want everybody to slow down, technology to slow down, I think we're naturally slowing down because it's in our nature. It's we as human beings, with the time progressing, we do that. We do have that tendency. However, your question is that should we allow the technology to, or should we force technology to slow down? I don't think it would be appropriate. I think we should allow technology to develop and to evolve and develop in a pace that it's allowed, that the science allows us to. I think the science puts its own limits on the time, if you look at the development of the vaccine, there are certain times that things need to develop, to be developed. And also from the automotive industry, from development, research and development, having had some association with BMW, I'm sure you've experienced something that, there are certain times, there is a certain time needed for developing, for example, a paint. It's usually about 12 to 18 months that the paint needs to develop. So there are certain things that physically we will not be able to jump the fence and say, well, let's catch up and let's speed it up and so on. So I think we should let it run its course. That's my sort of view.
Marek, I'd love to hear from you.
I don't know if I can add anything on top of that. If you don't mind, let's just go with the next one.
Yeah, of course. So the second question that I have before moving on to students' questions is that the topic of today's SCADstyle events is fusion and inclusion. So something that was mentioned earlier in the conversation was to design with a tech or digital first mindset. But will that leave some users behind?
Okay, so you said it's inclusion or?
And fusion. That's the theme of today's events. Yeah.
Will it leave some people behind? I mean, oh, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one. Whew. Yeah, but we are living in an optimistic world. So, of course, we're going to say it's going to leave us more possibilities to include even more people. And again, coming to the example of merging let's say, concrete vehicle example, it would be a people mover and let's say the package mover. Yeah, so the stuff that we talked about, I see there a vehicle concept that could drive autonomously, and I think today it's also operated by humans. So if I'm actually somebody sitting in a wheelchair, I would summon somebody and they will pick me up if I need to go somewhere and if I can't perform it with my wheelchair. So I will go outside. Like I live here in a urban area in quite a dense city, but in this house I could go down with my wheelchair and there will be a car and there will be a ramp and they're gonna load me in. And it's a funny thing because I observed this thing the other day. I think I also took a picture of it. I'm just looking for it simultaneously. And I know that this is a service that is being operated by people. Yeah, it's normal. And there I would even say it's actually quite nice to have a commercial vehicle. And here you can't really properly see it, but the tailgate is open and there is one person on a wheelchair entering this vehicle, but there is a human assisting it. And that's the thing that I value a lot because I want to have a normal interaction. I want to say like if you were to help me, like, hi Gwen, how is it going? Blah, blah, blah. Because that's actually creating the nice value, right? And on the other hand, living in a present where I have not a dump car anymore, but it's more intelligent because it's powered on tech and it's driven by software. I could even say, hey, perhaps Gwen forgot about picking me up today, and the big advantage will be I'm gonna ask any of these cars that are available in front of my door to pick me up because these are dump robots. So I'm gonna be even more inclusive as the operator of such a service because yeah, there won't be a Gwen that won't gonna show up because there is a robot. Yeah, so I think it's very inclusive, but on the other hand, I'm not gonna have the nice interaction with you. So yeah.
Tad, did you want to add to this question?
Yes, I think inclusion, infusion, things like that. I remember when I was a student, we had a project of a vehicle for the third world. And, you know, those were usually made out of the cardboard and plywood and things like that. And I thought at the time, you know, this is completely the wrong thing because it's not inclusive. It excludes the people, especially, you know, when we think about the third world. These are humans as we are, you know, in the first world or second world. Or I'm very much against dividing the world into sort of categories. We're all human beings, and I think intelligent creatures do act the way that they're allowed to. And I think when thinking about design, I think we need to think about the people and allow people to go with the latest technology, to allow them experience absolutely, you know, the top-notch stuff that we have dreamt about. So I'm very much for inclusion. There is no way, there is no other way for me, you know. So yes, that's my view.
I completely agree, Todd. We have time for one more question. We have a lot of questions in the chat. For those of you who have your questions, I'm sure you can send them to Cesar as he's connected with these two wonderful panelists and can get them their way. But we have one last question, and it's from Charlie. I hope I'm saying this right. Charlie Plussover, who's in industrial design. And they ask, how long do you think it will take for level 5 autonomous driving vehicles to be fully established on our roads?
May I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I think technology-wise, we got it. Like, it's all figured out. But we have a completely different problem, which is our legal system. Because if you look at the US, I don't know how many states allow this to happen. There is this big company that is a spin-off Google called Waymo. And how many states do they operate? I don't know. Tell me. Probably 3. If I look in Germany, everybody will be like, what are you talking about? Autonomous what? Carriage? Horse? Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe. 10 years. And that's the big contradiction or dilemma that we're living in. So it actually is already happening. And it depends on which system you want to establish that, because in a culture like in the US, you're going to be much faster than us in Europe, because we are not sure about this thing called internet, because we still like, I get a lot of paper or printed emails in my mailbox, because we're not sure whether this thing is going to last,
What about you, Tad? What do you think about that question?
It's not different in the
Look
US.
at Cesar. I think I'm always an optimist, and if you're talking about the science and the whole development of the world is going in a sort of exponential way, and what used to happen in the space of 10 years, about 10, 20 years ago, it happens within a year or 6 months. So I haven't got a magic wand and or crystal ball, but I would say, it's going to happen very soon that I'm going to have in my drive a pod that I will press the button, and that pod is going to take me into the center of Coventry or to Leamington or wherever. And I think I give it 5 years, not 10 years, that will be allowed to travel in autonomous, maybe not vehicles. Well, we have vehicles, autonomous devices. So yeah,
I love that optimism. Well, sadly, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next SCADstyle event happening. But before I do that, I want to thank you, Marek, Tad, Cesar, for an incredible conversation. Thank you for joining us this morning. Cesar, did you have anything you wanted to add before I introduce the next SCADstyle?
No, just thank you so much for everyone. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, Tad and Marek. I think this conversation should be a kind of a whole afternoon or maybe few afternoons. And then we touched the very first skin of it. There's so much more to be kind of considered. So
the proverbial tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Yeah, let's do another call.
The very, very, very first layer of that iceberg, kind of much more. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
And thank you everyone for joining. We will be having our next SCADstyle conversation, Designing for the Big Screen, with Annie Atkins beginning at 11 a.m. So we'll see you all there. Thank you all panelists, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Over and out from Europe. Bye.
Bye.